What's that awful stink? Smoke, sweat, shit. King's Landing in short. If you have a good nose, you can smell the treachery too. You've never smelled the city before? I smelled White Harbour. It never stank like this. White Harbour is the King's Landing, as my brother Tyrion is to Sir Gregor Clegane, Stillshanks Walton, and Jaime Lannister. A Storm of Swords Chapter 62, Jaime 7. If any single thing can show us the sheer impact House Targaryen had on the history of Westeros, it's the city of King's Landing, one of the largest and most economically important places in the Seven Kingdoms, becoming the centre of politics in the United Kingdoms that would become Westeros in the wake of Aegon's conquest. King's Landing is not the oldest city, and it would take many years for it to become the most populous, with the likes of Old Town, while bigger and more ancient, by the time of the main book series, only having a fraction of King's Landing's population. But while the likes of Old Town, Lannisport, Duskendale and White Harbour all grew very slowly over thousands of years, King's Landing turned from 3 hills with a fishing village to the sprawling city it is today, in an historical heartbeat of 300 years. Such is the influence of House Targaryen and the sheer investment made into this new capital city. The blood of the dragon very well could have just taken over an existing city or ruled from Dragonstone, but the development of King's Landing was supposed to send a message to all the peoples of Westeros as to what the blood of old Valyria was still capable of. In this mini-series, we'll be taking a deep dive into the history of King's Landing, from the small fishing village to the city that it is at the start of the main books. We will talk about why Aegon chose its location, its early history, the building of the Red Keep and the redevelopments under King Jaehaerys, which truly made King's Landing the city it is today. When Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters landed on the shores of Blackwater Bay as they began their conquest of the Seven Kingdoms, they landed on the very site that would later become the city of King's Landing, the very centre of Targaryen Westeros. As Aegon, his dragons, and small army looked out across the landscape, it would have seemed very different from what we know today. Instead of endless sprawls of streets and buildings, was lush green grass, as far as the eye could see, with 3 tall hills towering above them. Beside the hills was the Blackwater Rush, where the Blackwater River meets Blackwater Bay itself. But this idyllic piece of land was not completely empty. There did exist, near the banks of the river, a small fishing village with a handful of people living there. But here is something that has always struck maesters as a bit odd about the site of King's Landing. It's almost the perfect location to build a settlement. The wide open spaces are perfect for development. The Blackwater River would give fast access to the Riverlands and Blackwater Bay, making it a fantastic trade location. The high hills would make strong defensive locations. In fact, old stone ruins would be found atop each of the 3 hills, but no other sign of development. It's certainly odd that the only meaningful thing that existed before the conquest was this fishing village. One argument put forward was the larger port town of Duskendale to the north, the seat of the Darkling Kings of the Age of Heroes, made the necessity of another large port town in the region redundant. But Aegon the Conqueror did see the potential of this location and chose to use the highest of these hills as the base of his invasion of Westeros. In time, the 3 hills making up King's Landing would bear the names of each of the Targaryen conquerors, the 2 smaller named for Visenya and Rhaenys, and the tallest, the future site of the Red Keep, named for Aegon. There was no one to face Aegon when he landed on the shores of Blackwater Bay, as this area around the Rush had been claimed and disputed by several kingdoms for countless generations, and was currently being disputed by the Storm King Argilac Durrandon and the King of the Isles and Rivers, Harrenhal. But at some time the land had also been the dominion of the Darklings of Duskendale, the Masses of Stonedance, and the many River Kings, including the likes of the Blackwoods, the Brackens, the Fishers, the Hooks and the Muds. Aegon ordered the construction of a crude wooden and earth castle atop what became Aegon's High Hill at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush. After defeating a dozen castles in the vicinity of Blackwater Bay, Aegon commanded the defeated lords to attend him at his new Aegonfort. These men laid their swords at the Conqueror's feet, and Aegon confirmed them in their lands and their titles. Aegon's knights unveiled the heraldic banner of House Targaryen for the first time, with Visenya placing a crown on Aegon's head, and Rhaenys proclaimed him King of all of Westeros. The swords of those defeated in the burning of Harrenhal and the Field of Fire were 2 sent to the Aegonfort by wagon, and the Iron Throne itself was created from these melted, broken blades. The Aegonfort itself began as a moat and bailey fort on top of Aegon's high hill, and was relatively hastily built to give Aegon a secure foothold within mainland Westeros. Despite the crude nature of the fort, and being made of only wood, given its location atop Aegon's high hill, it would be very difficult to assault, even for the largest of armies. The small number of men Aegon had command of could easily hold the hill for months, and that's not even considering his dragons. The initial design was quickly replaced with a new log keep, with walls 50 feet high and a cavernous, dark long hall below it. Some say you could hardly see from one end of the Great Hall to the other, through the smoke of the hearths. While the fort was certainly comfortable, and did have a spacious living quarters for Aegon and his sisters, once the conquest was all said and done, the siblings much preferred travelling their new kingdom, or staying at their ancestral seat of Dragonstone. Across from the bailey was a stone-roofed kitchen made of slate, and the growing castle also had a stable and a granary. Its watchtowers were said to be 100 feet tall. As the Aegonfort grew, it gained a barracks and an armory, a modest sept, and later a drum tower with a palisade. Arguably the biggest choice Aegon had when he became High King was where he would rule his new realm from. Some rightly thought and argued he would choose Dragonstone, given its connection to House Targaryen. Some thought the obvious choice would be Oldtown, given it was the largest city in Westeros and the most populous, with it being the centre of the Faith of the Seven. But instead, Aegon chose the wooden Aegonfort and the modest village of King's Landing below its walls, and with that, King's Landing was set on a path of rapid growth and prosperity. The Iron Throne would eventually be installed in the smoky Long Hall, and from then on, King's Landing would grow around it. The Aegonfort was only a tenth as roomy as the older castle of Dragonstone, which was also much more secure and comfortable, and whilst it would stand for 35 years as King's Landing grew below it, the Aegonfort would need to be replaced by something much more permanent. And thus, the dreams of the Red Keep began.